Right, we'll just kind of kick things off. Yeah, thank you, Shona and Sam, for joining us today. Really, really much appreciated. This is our second to last webinar that we're hosting for the rest of the year. And yeah, it's been really good so far as well, just in terms of like people turning up and stuff. I guess a lot of people aren't really familiar with personal branding, so as I said, it's kind of like, a privilege to just kind of have a more intimate session so we can kind of get into the nitty gritty and like answer questions, all things personal branding. For those that are kind of familiar with the webinars, usually we have like a presentation up because we're usually like delving into some sort of industry. But I felt like with this one, because it's more so personal branding, I feel like it's important for us to just kind of have a more relaxed, like laid back session where it's just like a bit of a Q&A, and just really hearing from our guests like how they've built their personal brands and like tips and tricks and things that we can kind of like use to build personal brands ourselves. And I guess like with that being said, like I'll open it up to the floor for maybe Shona, for you to go first and kind of introduce yourself, and then Sam as well, and then we can open it up to like questions and have a conversation about personal branding.
Fantastic, cool. Hey everyone. It's good to sort of meet everyone and be here to kind of chat about personal branding. Is something I've been a fan of and a big advocate for quite a couple of years now. I'm currently head of creative at the Gradsoc, which is a company that basically helps students and graduates get jobs through providing internships, resources, employability coaching, and LinkedIn is one of the main areas that we kind of advocate for.
Nice, Sam.
Awesome. Hey guys, Sam here. Stephen, thanks so much for putting this on, by the way, and really appreciate the invite. Great to be here. My name's Sam. I run a company called Kurogo, and what we do is we work with other founders and CEOs of companies to help them build out their personal brands. So work quite closely with a lot of senior leaders to kind of fix their online reputations, make them look good. So yeah, been in the space for probably about 3 years or so now. Built a team of 16, I think we are, and we work with, I think, about 100 founders and CEOs.
Nice, nice. And maybe we'll start with you then, Sam. So how did your, I guess, like personal branding journey start just in general, and then maybe like talk about what platforms you started to double down on and like really build your personal brand?
Yeah, kind of by accident, to be honest. I almost started building a personal brand without even realizing what it was, what a personal brand was. I was 19, 20-ish at the time. So it was about 2019, whilst I was at university, actually. And I wanted to start getting a few freelance marketing projects just to kind of get a little bit of experience in the industry whilst I was doing my studies, develop my career. And I tried everything to get these projects. I didn't have much experience. I tried kind of messaging people. I tried going to networking events, but nothing really seemed to work.
Mm,
And it didn't work because nobody really knew who I was or knew about my expertise. So what I started doing was just sharing bits of advice, bits of information, things that I was learning on LinkedIn to try and show people that I knew what I was doing. It was strange at the time. LinkedIn was just seen as this very like blue collar corporate platform. And
mm.
I was a little bit afraid of posting at first, but I did it anyway. And then after a few times, people started kind of reaching out to me saying, I've seen you posting, I've seen your profile. I'd love to get some help on my own profile. Can you help me? And that's when I kind of discovered that this whole world of personal branding existed.
Noted, noted. And how about you, Shona? Then what was your kind of like entry point into building a personal brand?
Yeah, so actually pretty similar to Sam's there. I actually had a look back and tried to remember exactly when it was that I made my profile, and mine was in 2019 as well. Because we got told in a second year uni lecture, like at the very end of the lecturer was like, "Oh, by the way, you should all have a LinkedIn profile, otherwise you won't get a job." And then that was it. It was never mentioned again at university whatsoever. And that's something we hear from so many students and graduates that they've been told to make a profile, but then have no idea what to do with it from there. I sort of figured, I was like, okay, I think I could maybe turn this into something. So I started by just following people who interested me. And first of all, because the perception, exactly as Sam said, was that it's just full of boring people who are like 30 years into their careers. And I
Mm,
found a couple of people mainly in like the marketing space who obviously been a little bit more kind of creative and actually talking about interesting stuff. And I kind of followed them. And then after couple of months, maybe like 6 months or so of like just commenting on other people's stuff, I finally got the kind of confidence to actually start posting myself. And I posted about so many random things, which I could like talk about in a second. But yeah, from doing that, I gained multiple freelance opportunities while being at uni because people kind of got to know me on there. And I applied, like I found for and applied for an internship with the Gradsoc, which ultimately turned into like my full-time job now. So I kind of think like the sooner you start with LinkedIn, the better. It's kind of a long game, and not something that should stop as well when you get a job. Like that personal branding can sort of continue throughout your career because you don't really know kind of where it's going to take you.
Noted, noted. And I guess like, when you guys were kind of building your personal brand on LinkedIn, and the reason why I'm doing quotation marks is because at the time, did you feel like it was personal branding, or was it just I'm just posting on this like platform that someone's told me to be on? Like, what did personal branding mean to you in that respect? And did you classify it as personal branding?
It's really interesting. I'd be interested to hear Shona's thoughts on this as well. But for me, like the first few times, it didn't really know what I was doing. Like I didn't know it was personal branding, so I didn't see it like that. But
Mm,
I think the difference is when it turns from just posting content to being a personal branding exercise is when there's intention behind it and purpose. And when you have like a clear aim or a clear kind of reputation that you want to build, that's when I think it becomes personal branding. So as soon as I realized that actually I can influence what people think about me and I can get job offers and I can ultimately build a business from this sort of thing, I think that's when it turned into personal branding rather than just chucking stuff out aimlessly.
noted, noted. What about you, Shona?
Yeah, definitely. As I say, when I started on that, I hadn't even heard the term personal brand. To me, it feels like a relatively new term. And that's why I think a lot of kind of students in particular, if they've never really heard about what it is or like what it does. So yeah, I definitely didn't start with the intention of building a personal brand. I just started chatting about stuff that I liked. And then that kind of ultimately fed into sort of my career, and it accidentally sort of turned into like a personal brand and stuff like that as well. Yeah, I think personal brand is basically, as Sam said, it's how you're kind of perceived. It's the things that people know about you, because with LinkedIn, just like with your CV, people will only know what you tell them. They'll only know about you the information that you put out there. And obviously LinkedIn, like, it's such a concise platform. It gives you such a big opportunity to tell people about the skills you've got, the stuff you're interested in, your like values and your mission and everything like that. So I think it's a great opportunity to let people get to know you on a more personal level as well, particularly with jobs and careers and stuff. CV is just a piece of paper, whereas on LinkedIn, you can talk in your natural tone of voice and people can basically get to know the personality, not just sort of the skill set and the expertise as well.
Yeah, no, of course. I realize I'm not really shedding insight into like how I kind of started my journey on LinkedIn as well. But again, like I feel like my story is kind of like similar to you guys' as well. I don't actually remember in uni anyone telling me to make a LinkedIn account, but I just know that when I graduated, all of a sudden I had this like LinkedIn account that I just don't even recall making one for. And I used to treat it like Instagram, because I think what a lot of people tend to forget is that LinkedIn is just another social media platform. Like beyond it being a social media platform for professionals, it's social media at the end of the day. So like I always just treated it like it was just any other social media platform I was on, and that's kind of the way I navigated it. And I wouldn't say I really, when I was posting on there, I wasn't really defining like personal branding in any sort of way. It was just kind of like, I'm just posting whatever I'm posting. But I guess like, my question to you guys now is that how do you start to kind of like define what a personal brand looks like, and again, like I think this is kind of a twofold question, but are you supposed to distinguish like, the personal brand that you would maintain on Instagram from LinkedIn, for example? Like, are you supposed to do that? Because I tend to just really be outlandish and, and try to like be consistent across platforms, but it would be interesting to hear you guys' take on how you kind of defined your personal brands.
Yeah, I'd say as well with obviously the line between kind of personal and professional is something I know a lot of people kind of worry about on LinkedIn. And I'd say it does kind of depend on what industry you're in. As if you're in more of a like a corporate industry, then you're going to probably be naturally more sort of professional than if you are working in like marketing or something where you kind of have the leeway to be a bit more like funny and show more kind of your personality and being like a bit risque in some senses as well. So I think like the industry kind of dictates some of that. But I also kind of say with personality, if you're there on LinkedIn, writing in your natural tone of voice, talking about your missions and values, and some people, like employers, don't vibe with that, then you wouldn't want to work for them anyway. If they're not going to sort of accept you and your personality as you are, then that's probably a sign that that's not right for you. And I found, in fact, that it actually attracts sort of the right people and people with like a similar mission, similar interests and stuff like that naturally by you putting yourself out there. So I find that kind of works in two really good ways there.
What about you, Sam?
I'd definitely echo that. Like, if an employer is not gonna like your personality, then you'd rather find out before you get the job than 6 months into it. So like, don't cover up aspects of your personality. Basically, don't be afraid to share who you truly are, because there is a company out there for you, and you will find them, and there will be people that kind of vibe with it. You can reverse engineer a little bit if you're quite practical about it, what kind of personality you should be showing based on, like, what are your goals? If your goals are to get a job at a company that values people that are creative, fun, down to earth, then if you just think about it logically, then it would kind of make sense to show that you are creative, fun, and down to earth, and you can kind of express those values. And then across platforms, it's an interesting one. I think there's slight nuances. You're not going to be exactly the same on TikTok as you are on LinkedIn, for example, but I don't think they should be wildly different. If your presence on lots of different platforms is wildly different, it suggests that you're probably not being authentic on at least one of them. So there might be slight nuances, but I wouldn't have wildly different profiles across them.
Noted. And I guess, like, my next question is striking that balance between authenticity, but then also, like, like doing a bit too much. So what I mean by this is that, are there any do's and don'ts when it comes to personal branding? And then specifically looking at LinkedIn as well, because at the end of the day, it's still very much like a professional platform, right? So, are there any boundaries that you should maintain? Are there things that are just like a no, you shouldn't do that? Like, it would be interesting to hear your take on that.
Wow. I don't make the rules for LinkedIn, but like, as an employer, think quite logically about what you would and wouldn't want your employer to see. Like, like pictures of you on a crazy night out at uni are probably best kept off LinkedIn, and just be a little bit sensible about it. There's not necessarily rules, and there'll probably be a company that go amazing. That's great, but I think you can be pretty sensible about just thinking about the sorts of things that you'd want on there. And trust me, they'll find it. Like, if it's on there, if it's on LinkedIn, they'll probably find it.
What about you, Shona?
Definitely, yeah. No, I completely agree with that as well. Yeah, as we mentioned before with personality and stuff like that, it depends on sort of the industry that you're in. But I'd also say you kind of get more comfortable as time goes on, and you naturally learn what's like usual on LinkedIn as well. That's one of the biggest bits of advice with students wondering, like, what do I post on LinkedIn? It's like, absorb other people's content first, get a feel for kind of the norms and how far some people go, and also whether you naturally feel comfortable doing that as well. Like, if you're naturally more of an outgoing and chatty person, and things like that. But yeah, I'd say look at other people's posts and get a feel for what kind of stuff is usually talked about, if any stuff is taboo. And yeah, basically I'd just say, because obviously there's sometimes a difference between there's a lot of companies and brands that kind of being a bit more risque, and then it's like just noting the difference between being like sort of like funny and friendly and then sort of being rude, as I see a lot of people kind of doing that as well. But I think as long as you're genuinely just being like a nice person and sort of genuinely reflecting being a nice person, I think that's always a good route to go down as well.
No, noted. Yeah, no, I think, yeah, I'm still kind of trying to strike the balance, because at the same time, I think, especially like Shauna, you mentioned about it depends on the industry, and being someone that's worked in traditional finance roles, I find that you have to maintain this image of suit and tie, and you need to be clean cut and so on and so forth. And I think I'm just trying to kind of demystify that. So I find myself pushing the boundaries just a little bit to see how far I can take it. So far so good, but I do get like the odd comment here and there from time to time, and a few trolls here and there kind of saying you shouldn't be doing this if you're working in this kind of industry. And I guess, like, my question is that how do you deal with negativity and like just conflict of opinions? Because at the end of the day, like, social media is this place where everybody has a voice now, because like, we're all behind keyboards. So how do you navigate that? Because not everyone's going to agree with what you're doing or what you're posting.
I'd say personally, I'm awful for this. I take any negative things to heart, absolutely, and I'm still working on this. But yeah, it depends on each platform as well. So obviously on LinkedIn, people do tend to be a bit more sort of formal with their disagreements. People don't generally get like as rude as they would on TikTok, for example. TikTok is an absolute minefield.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think on every platform, there's always going to be some people who want to disagree, who want to start a conflict. I've seen posts just about someone's like opinion, and the people in the comments are absolutely ripping into them, and I just think like, what's the point in that? I think if you've got like a genuine opinion on something and you're not being rude or argumentative or anything like that, I'd say just reiterate like your own point and never reply to stuff in the heat of the moment if someone's being sort of like horrible to you. Some people are literally just out there looking for conflict, and they go and find other people's posts just to comment on it. Like you'll see the other day of a profile picture, they're not connected with you. You sort of wonder, how on earth have they found my post through all of this stuff? Particularly if a post like pops off, if it does well, it'll be exposed to hundreds and thousands more people way outside of your network. So you're more likely to get that small percentage of people who just want to disagree. Putting yourself out there is terrifying. Opening yourself up to have literally anyone comment on your own posts and express their opinions is terrifying, particularly if you're like a student or graduate. But I'd say, yeah, you'll be able to tell if someone genuinely has a point to their like disagreement, which case you can sort of reply in a really nice way and be like, oh, I understand that. I'd never thought of that before. But if someone's just trolling for the sake of it, honestly block them.
No, I hear it. I hear it. What about you, Sam? And I appreciate that you probably had a lot more exposure to this as well, not only from your perspective, but also clients as well. Especially if you're dealing with like almost 100 plus founders. So how do you kind of advise clients on how to navigate all of this and deal with like conflict or negativity?
Yeah, the I want to give a simple answer, which is just like ignore it, which is the best thing to do. But I know it's not that simple, and I know it's definitely a barrier that stops people posting. One of the things that we always say to our clients is that actually, if you're not having anyone disagree with you, you're probably not being yourself enough, or you're not sharing your opinions enough, because naturally, out of the what like 800 million people that use LinkedIn, if not all of them, if all of them agree with you, you've probably not said that anything like that meaningful anyway. So
Mm,
it's perfectly natural for one of those 800 million or two or whatever to disagree with you. And that's actually a good thing, because it shows you're sharing an opinion. It shows you're sharing something that's going to start a conversation. But it's definitely like, it's way, the amount of negativity on there is way smaller than you expect it to be. Like it's
yeah.
always, clients are always really worried about it, but we see very few bits of it. It's generally okay.
Yeah, yeah, I find that so I'm actually really toxic because I like sometimes like I feel like just echoing your sentiments, Sam, like if you're not getting like any sort of like conflict or any sort of like negative stuff, you're probably not really like cutting through with the content as much as you need to. And I find that most of the negative stuff I get online, I just use it and turn it into more content, like depending on how constructive it is. Like I usually just end up like getting more content ideas from it. So that's kind of like my way of navigating it, to be honest. And I guess like it kind of goes into my next question of being like a student or a graduate, right? How do you kind of go about figuring out what to actually post on a platform, especially because now LinkedIn is turning into this like traditional social media platform where there's influencers and creators, and I feel like to some certain extent a lot of people feel like I can't post if I'm not an influencer, I'm not a creator. So how do you go about, navigating, okay, what do I actually post as a student slash graduate on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think one really important thing to remember is that if you look at like every influencer and every creator, where they've come from, they've just been sharing content around the things that interest them. Like that is all it is at its root. So to start off, I would just share stuff that interests you. If that's like horticulture, fine. If it's marketing, great. If it's finance, like no problem. Just share the things that interest you and that you're passionate about and that excite you. Later down the line, by all means, you can get a little bit more strategic about, you can look at like what sort of content is resonating with your audience, what sort of content is going to reflect the best personality of you, all of these sorts of things. But just to get started, you want to lower the barriers as much as possible. You want to make it really easy and kind of pick low hanging fruit that you can post about. Just do stuff that you're interested in. That's going to make it the easiest it can be for you to get stuff out there.
Noted. What about you, Shona?
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, I think everyone, when they start on LinkedIn, it takes a while to find yourself and find what you like to talk about. I went back through my old LinkedIn posts a while ago, and I did a post about Animal Crossing. I did a post about crystals. Like, it was about the most random stuff, but it kind of led me towards, again, figuring out what your audience likes, but also figuring out what I want to talk about. Because when you're a student or graduate, you obviously don't have years of work experience you can talk about. You don't have like industry knowledge to a certain extent. You kind of think, no one's going to want to hear what I have to say. Like, what do I know? But you have your opinions, you have your thoughts, you have things you're interested in. There'll always be recent news about the industry that you want to get into, even if you're not in that industry. So you can chat about recent developments. Like, for example, I'm connected with loads of students who like marketing and social media. So if ever there's like a big change in the industry, they not only like say, oh, this has been a change, they add their own thoughts about what they think about it. It's about, oh, this has happened with Twitter, I think this is going to do this. Because if that's just what you think, like, that can't really be wrong. It's just your own opinion. Again, it could start like a conversation in the comments, but as well, something for students and graduates to post about. Whatever experiences you're having, thousands of other students will be having that exact same experience, but they'll all be too nervous to talk about it. It's like in class, everyone probably has the same question, but only one person is like confident enough to put up their hand and be like, hi, I'm struggling with this, can you answer this question? And LinkedIn's kind of the same. So I've seen a lot of students build their personal brands by talking about the fact that they're struggling to build personal brands, the fact they don't know what to post about, the fact they're struggling to apply for jobs and all that sort of stuff, because it's relatable, it gets other people talking, and they can make connections through that as well. So yeah, whatever you're struggling with, other people will be experiencing the same. So you can even talk about that. That can be your personal brand, kind of speaking up on behalf of other students. Just as I say, get creative with it. And as Sam says, talk about stuff you're interested in. Because if you talk about stuff you're not interested in, LinkedIn will be the most boring platform ever. Whereas if you chat about stuff you like, it can actually be quite a genuinely fun place to go on.
Yeah, noted, noted. And I would also say, like, before you even get started posting, I think one of you guys mentioned this earlier, but just start engaging with people you find interesting or things that are like interesting to you. Just start engaging that way and kind of like instigating conversation there. And then from there you start to get comfortable, like, okay, I can kind of like, form my opinion on this. Like this post that someone made, I think I can like give a view on this as well before you kind of like graduate into like, okay, I want to post stuff now. So that's the way I would kind of go about it, to be honest. Um, Moving on to my next question, we've all heard that LinkedIn is obviously the platform for networking at its core, right? Because there's a lot of professionals there. How do you go about networking on LinkedIn? Like, with 823 million members, and some people like just don't reply to their DMs. I'm like guilty. Like I get so many DMs sometimes and I just can't reply. Like, what's the right way or the most effective way to go about networking on the platform?
Yeah, I'm resonate with that. Like my my LinkedIn inbox is absolute carnage. There's all sorts in there, and it's actually quite difficult to stand out. One thing that will really help is if you want to reach out to someone, let's say a potential employer or someone in the industry that you admire and you'd just like to get a bit of advice from them, you've got to do something to stand out, right? And one thing that's really going to help is maybe leaving comments or engaging with their content for a couple of days before you actually reach out to them, because that puts you on their map, that makes them recognize you. And you're almost, by engaging in your content, you're giving them something, you're showing interest in them first, and they know that you're not just kind of copy and pasting this message to 100 other people. And then when you do reach out to them, make sure it's really personalized to that person. So it's not just like a templated message that you send to loads and loads of people, but show that you've done a little bit of research on them, pick something about their profile or their work or their industry or their business or something that you like about them, so that they can see that you've kind of gone to the time and effort doing that. Even if it's something that you have in common, maybe they posted about something that they're interested in and you have some common interest there. Just something that shows this isn't just like a blank pitch to loads and loads of people that you sent out. That does wonders, and that makes you much more inclined to respond to it because they put a bit of effort in, right? It makes a massive difference.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. I always find as well if someone references like my recent post or something, that usually gets my attention. Another thing that people have been doing, they'll be like, "I saw your content on TikTok," and they specify like what video. That usually like gets my attention a lot as well. So yeah, that I think yeah, being personable like in the DMs like really helps, to be honest. What about you, Shona? Like, what would you say are like the key standouts to networking on LinkedIn?
Yeah, definitely. And obviously within that, personalizing your connection request as well. I always say to students and graduates, because a lot of people just hit the connect button and kind of don't add in that little message where you can mention the TikTok, the post, all that sort of stuff. Because again, people who are busy, they're only going to probably look through and see the people who've added the message in. Otherwise, like if I get a connection request, for example, a student who maybe is in like an entirely different industry to the ones that we usually talk about, there's no real kind of reason for me to accept that connection request. And I can only imagine that's like 100 times more for CEOs and founders and everything like that as well. Ironically, I did a LinkedIn post a couple of months ago about the importance of personalizing your connection requests. Obviously, I get a bunch more requests after each post, and only one person out of that had personalized their connection request. And I was like, just take the advice, like, come on, do it. Add in that extra little sentence, because if it increases you, like it takes you an extra 20 seconds, it increases the chance of it being accepted. But yeah, finding, as Sam says, that kind of warm introduction point, something in common, something of theirs you like. Chances are they'll have posted on LinkedIn regularly, so referencing the post, that sort of stuff as well. But yeah, using LinkedIn, I'd say, as goes back to interests, find people who genuinely interest you and have conversations about things that genuinely interest you. Otherwise, it's going to feel like an absolute chore. Whereas if you're chatting about something that you're excited by, the other person can tell that as well. And that stands out an absolute mile off, that enthusiasm. And chances are they're going to remember you if they've got a connection they think you should connect with, a job role that comes up, anything like that. I'd say that's probably always the best advice I can give.
No, definitely. I'm so guilty of this. I never used to send like personal connection requests on LinkedIn. And that's just when I was kind of on the platform and I wasn't really posting with intentionality. I was just kind of like, I'm a professional. I'm supposed to have LinkedIn, right? So I'll just literally connect with random people. Whereas like now I kind of make content on the platform. I'm more intentional with the people I accept. You know, I'm more intentional about the people that I want to see their content. So like I always like when I send connection requests, I'm always personalizing it now. So yeah, no, very 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 interesting point. Someone asked a question that I feel like may be appropriate for Sam to answer, given the fact that you work with a lot of clients, and then maybe Shona, if you have views on this as well. But they were like, what type of posts on LinkedIn are more likely to go viral? um, Controversial posts, educational posts, humorous posts, etc. Like, you know, what are your views on this and just insight into this?
Yeah, controversial posts definitely likely to go viral because they stimulate a lot of conversation. So the way LinkedIn will basically, when you post on LinkedIn, LinkedIn has an algorithm that decides how good your post is, good, so to speak. And that basically determines how many people they show it to. So in order to get them to show it to lots and lots of people and for it to go viral, you've basically got to show the algorithm that it's a good post. And to do that, comments are really, really important. So the more comments you get on your post, LinkedIn's algorithm basically goes, oh, this is an interesting post. Let's show it to more people and so on and so on.
Mm,
So sharing something controversial is likely to get lots of people commenting because people feel strongly one way or another about it. And that creates conversation and discussion in the comments. So that gets loads and loads of comments. Loads of people are interested in it. Loads of people are engaged and it tends to go viral. So definitely controversial, humorous, we've definitely seen. Educational, we find are less likely to go viral, but still a really important part of your content kind of strategy to make sure you are showing you know your stuff, showing that you're credible. What else? Often like reactive things to stuff that's happened in the news or in major events like the World Cup at the moment. We're seeing lots of like World Cup related content go viral. And that's quite good stuff. That's if it's in the news, if lots of people are talking about it, if it's on Twitter, for example, you've already got evidence that people are interested in it. So it's more likely to get mass interaction. But yeah, definitely controversial, definitely humorous.
hmm What about you, Shona?
Yeah, I'd say with viral content, something to consider, which is something that's kind of left over from my social media manager days, for like any platform, is also think about your intentions with going viral. As a lot of people say, like, oh, I want to go viral. And it's like, okay, but why do you want to do that? And what do you want to get from it? Obviously, going viral, it gets far more eyes on your profile and your content. But if, for example, you're looking for a graduate job or to change your industries or new opportunities, what can you do with that virality? Is your profile set up to tell people exactly who you are, exactly what job you're after? Has it got all the right keywords in it and everything like that? Sometimes people set their goals on getting like a certain amount of likes or a certain amount of views, but unless you turn that into something, it's kind of like a hollow sort of like social media achievement. You kind of want to think, okay, why do I actually want to get all these views, and what can I then do with that to turn this into an opportunity? Because again, you might get sort of more followers, but then you think, okay, how do I keep these followers from that one viral post engaged for my future content as well? So the focus should be on either like building a personal brand, or as I say, setting up your profile to get people to message you, or take a certain action, kind of like with any sort of form of marketing. That's something else I'd say it's probably quite good to consider.
Yeah, that's something I was going to mention, that, virality is like really a trivial kind of metric when you're making content on social media. Yes, it's all good to get followers and so on and so forth, but you really need to understand the impact behind, like, what that virality brings, right? So like me, for example, one of the main reasons why I post on LinkedIn a lot is to convince a lot of people to, like, join our website, look at the content, look at the resources we have and so on and so forth. And I find that when I make viral content talking about some sort of controversial topic, that really does not move the needle in terms of people signing up to our website. Whereas in actuality, the educational content I make that gets like 20 likes, like out of that 20 likes, at least 7 people would go and look at the website. And that to me is a lot more impactful than a post that has 500 likes with just a bunch of new followers and people that were just tuned into like some sort of controversial hot take I had. So yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment there, Shona, that it's all about really the intention and the impacts that you want to kind of have from a post, really. So yeah, the advice is not to just go and post a lot of controversial content on LinkedIn. but yeah, like, another question I kind of had as well is that, just on that point of networking in LinkedIn and, like really shooting your shot in people's DMs and so on and so forth. Shona, I know you kind of have a lot of insight into this. How do you use LinkedIn in order to get jobs? Like, for example, like how do you do that conversion? Like, what do you do there?
So there's obviously a couple of different ways. One of them is obviously reaching out to people, making connections, starting conversations, everything like that. But another way that a lot of people sort of think, at least I didn't think it would actually happen or actually existed. And I'll tell kind of like a story to illustrate it a little bit better. So obviously when I started posting on LinkedIn, one of the main things I was interested in was TikTok, because again, this was in like 2019. So it was in the earlier days of TikTok, the platform. Not as many brands had realized how fantastic of an opportunity it was. So I just posted about TikTok on LinkedIn all the time because I absolutely loved it. I was an absolute TikTok nerd. And I just talked about it all the time. I talked about the like growth I'd created for the Gradsoc on their TikTok account. And I didn't really think anyone was kind of looking at it. Like I got obviously like a couple of likes, like some posts would get like 5 likes, some would maybe get like maximum 40, and this sort of stuff. But then one day, again, this was while I was still in university, another company that I'd never even heard of before had put a post out, be like, hey, we're looking for like a TikTok creator to come and create some TikToks for us. And 5 different people tagged me in that post. And I didn't know who any of those 5 people were. I'd never had conversations with them, but we never directly spoken. But all of them had been, sounds stalkery. All of them had been like watching what I was doing. They've been aware of me through my personal brand because I talked about TikTok loads. They could tell I was enthusiastic about it. They could tell I was knowledgeable about it. So when they saw that post, be like, oh, we're looking for someone to do TikTok, they were like, ah, Shona knows about TikTok, we'll tag her in that. And I got freelance opportunities through that as well. So even if it doesn't feel like it's doing anything, it really, really is. And I kind of make a point now to, if I see students out there who are consistently posting and not getting that many likes, I make sure to message them to be like, I see what you're doing. It's great. Keep it up, because LinkedIn is a long game. So yeah, you can either reach out or stuff, or in the background, start building that personal brand, start talking about things you're interested in, because things can come out of absolutely nowhere and people are seeing what you're doing. But yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely, I agree. Sam, in terms of like the clients you work with, I can imagine that, one of the reasons why they're on LinkedIn is really to further like their business endeavors and so on and so forth. But would you have any insight into how to use LinkedIn to, I guess, achieve the objective of getting a job? Because in some way, shape, or form, that's what your clients are doing essentially. Like, they're trying to get the job done through people signing up to their products and so on and so forth. So what kind of strategies do you advise they kind of go about getting more leads and, more prospects for their business?
Yeah, and to be fair, I'd go as far as to say I reckon at least 50% of our clients that we currently work with are posting on LinkedIn because they want to attract top talent. Like they also want you guys, like they want the talent as well. They are on LinkedIn looking for people to hire and also trying to make themselves look attractive as an employer. So like people are literally looking for this. And I mean, with all of the people I've ever hired, I couldn't tell you anyone's grades in our team right now. Like genuinely, I'm being like super transparent. I don't know anyone's A-level grades or university grades or anything, but all of them I found through them posting on LinkedIn. Like it's so much more important for me. I know it's not the case for absolutely every single company in every industry, but it's definitely becoming more and more important. So um, yeah, like it's people are definitely looking for it. And I would just make sure, kind of reverting back to that point that we were making on the going viral topic, is like make sure there's some intentionality behind it and focus less on going viral and more on creating the right representation of yourself, or the kind of representation that's going to get you hired.
No, noted, noted. Just in terms of like practical steps on my side, in terms of how I've used LinkedIn to secure a job. So when I was working in consulting, I made the decision that I wanted to move into private equity. And again, I didn't really have insight into this industry beyond like working in consulting and just the minimal exposure I had there. And I figured, okay, I need some sort of inroad. So I literally just identified people in the roles that I wanted to work in, and I'll just like shoot them like a connection request, kind of noting that, hi, like, you're in this role kind of thing. I find it super interesting. It would be nice if we could kind of catch up and just learn more about what you do. And that was kind of like my inroad. I sent that message to about 20 people and only one person responded to me. But that one person looked at my CV, became my mentor, helps me out with interview processes, and then I use that to basically like secure a job. And I think what I kind of want people to take away from this is that, you're going to reach out to a lot of people on LinkedIn and they're not entitled to reply to you. It's their time at the end of the day. But just, kind of be resilient in the fact that you're just putting yourself out there anyways. And, with that being said, it's people's time, but ultimately all you need is one person to respond to you. And like, that kind of helps. And also like when you're reaching out to these people as well, it's all well and good like being intentional and stating why exactly like you want to catch up with them, but really reach out to people with the intention to build a relationship. Don't just be super super transactional. That's what I would ultimately say about it as well. So when I reached out to this person, like, I genuinely wanted them to be my mentor for the long run. It wasn't a thing of where I was just like, tell me what you do and help me get a job and like go away. And I used to do that. I used to be very very transactional, but I would say it's really all about building relationships, because people are human at the end of the day and they don't want to feel used. So that was kind of just like my way of basically being able to use the platform in order to get a job. Another thing that I advise candidates on doing as well is that if you apply for a job, like, see if you can find the hiring manager on LinkedIn and just drop them a note and be like, hi, I just applied for a job, by the way, like, hope you see my application. And sometimes it helps as well. So that's what I'd kind of say on that point. Someone asked, which I feel like is a bit of a technical one now. Would you shed some insight into how to structure a post on LinkedIn? So I know, you guys are copywriting gurus, Sam and Shona. So you guys might be able to shed a bit of insight into what the platform likes when it comes to structuring posts.
Yeah, I'd say number one thing is a strong hook. And what we mean by hook is like the first few lines, the opening lines. When you probably notice if you're scrolling through the LinkedIn feed, it doesn't always show the whole post. It will show like the first line, two, maybe three, and then it says see more. So there's that. And then if you think about the mindset that people are in whilst they're scrolling LinkedIn, truthfully, no one goes to LinkedIn just for your content. Like it sounds savage, but it's true. No one is there just for you. They're there for like quick wins for themselves. They're there to learn. They're there to network. So they're there for selfish reasons. And they've got hundreds of posts in their feed to choose from. Like they could read any one of 100, probably a few hundred posts in that morning, maybe, or that scroll. They've got ads coming up. They've got messages coming in. They've got notifications. They got, connection requests. They're probably getting emails. They've probably got like kids crying or whatever in the background. Like there's so much stimuli in their environment. There's so much going on. And you've got like one or two, maybe three lines to capture their attention and convince them that their time and attention is well spent on your post. So those first three lines are like super, super important. If you don't get them right, then the rest of your post is kind of meaningless because people won't read it. So work really hard to create something that's eye-catching, that clearly shows the value people are going to get out of the post, or clearly shows what it's going to be about. And then once you've done that and you've got people reading, just make sure the whole thing is really easy for them to read. Again, like, people are inherently lazy, and if a post is difficult for them to read, they'll just move on to one that is easier. They should be able to kind of scan it and get the main points. So like lots of white space, none of these paragraphs that you're doing in your dissertations or anything like that. Like lots of white space, short, snappy lines, cut out any unnecessary words, and just make it as easy and digestible, as easy to read and as digestible as you possibly can.
Noted, noted. What about you, Shona? Like, I know you kind of make a lot of educational content with like tips and tricks on how to like, do interviews and so on and so forth. What do you feel like is the best format and structure in terms of, really making sure that you get your point across?
Yeah, I'd say, as Sam said, like the visual look of the post is kind of just as important to keep people reading. Because yeah, if there's a massive chunk of paragraph, even if it's something that interests me, I'm too lazy to read it. Thanks to TikTok, my attention span is at an all-time low. So as Sam says, I want to be able to like scan through it and see, and breaking that up, as he says, and also including emojis sometimes. Obviously, it depends on like how professional you want your profile to be, but there's definitely an exact term for it, but by looking at an emoji, you can get the sense and the feel of what a post is talking about without necessarily reading the words as well. Your brain does some kind of magic and it translates that into the meaning of posts. So for example, if I'm talking about social media and I have the little phone emoji, that automatically, even without them reading any words, they can kind of get a sense of what the post is about, things like that visually. Yeah, with the beginning, with the hook, make it interesting and let people know what you're going to be talking about, so then they can make that split-second decision to continue reading it or not. I try and make it as clear as possible within those first couple of lines exactly the topic I'm going to be discussing in the post, whether that's if I'm talking about CVs, internships, getting experience, things like that, potentially even starting, or if you don't start, end with a question that will get people commenting, because that will push it further. And yeah, don't keep it too kind of long-winded. If you've got a point to make, then kind of like, make your point. And you can always expand on it in later posts, in the comments, anything like that as well. And yeah, adding in hashtags sort of where you can to make it more relevant. But yeah, keeping it interesting and not using, again, it depends on an industry, but not using too much of an overly professional voice. Unless you're in an industry where that's accepted, I'd say there's no need, particularly if you're a student or graduate, to use these massive, long, fancy words. Speak in your natural tone of voice, because I naturally write how I speak, which is 100 miles an hour, just in a very naturally chatty way. So I find a lot of people find it easier to read that because it's not written like an essay, it's written like someone talking, and that's naturally quite often more interesting than if you'd read like a big old paragraph in really serious sort of words.
Yeah, I always see a lot of the copywriting gurus always say write like you the way you speak. Like that's like always a consistent rhetoric when it comes to typing on LinkedIn. But yeah, all great points. I think one thing that I would kind of add to that as well is just make sure that there's like one clear message that you communicate. And I find that when I used to write on LinkedIn, I had so many points I wanted to get across, and the post, like, you wouldn't even understand the point of the post because there's so much intertwined into it. Whereas like now when I'm writing, it's kind of like, this is the one thing I'm talking about, and if you read this hook, that's what you're going to like read on, and this is the only message that I'm kind of like trying to get across. So I would say, like, just be super clear, like, just through one message, like, right, make it as simple as possible. Someone said, what would your advice be for someone in a technical field trying to build their personal brand, as technical stuff often tends to be less engaging? So how do you kind of advise your clients on how to go about this, Sam? Because I can imagine, like, advising 100 CEOs and founders, like, not all their businesses are interesting, right? So how do you make it interesting on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so that's where your personality becomes super, super important. Like, inject your personality into that content and do something that's slightly different. I wouldn't go like overly heavy on industry terminology and jargon that most people wouldn't understand. But if it's a topic that is often kind of typically quite heavy and is like unavoidably technical, then leverage your personality to make the content more digestible. Like if the information itself is going to be hard to digest, make sure the presentation of it is as consumable as possible. So like, don't be afraid to have fun with it. Like, maybe sharing videos would be a great way to do it rather than just text-based content. You might be able to do infographics. You might be able to like communicate what you want to share in meme format. Like, have fun with it.
Definitely, yeah. I think as well with, again, certain industries, chatting about recent developments and new things like that. Obviously, things that are more technical, there might be kind of interesting developments happening all the time. And instead of just sharing articles, sharing your opinions on those articles or things that you're excited for in the future. Obviously, even if you don't have like years and years of industry knowledge, so you can't create like as much informative content, chat about the things that you're learning and things you're doing to kind of improve. Because as a student or graduate, again, that content probably isn't going to go viral or pop off, but if your other content does and it attracts an employer to your profile, they look at your recent posts, which is something I usually do when we're trying to find new interns and stuff like that. And they see you've done a post about that online course you completed, about these new things that you're learning, about these skills that you're developing and the things you're excited to do in your career. That's going to help feed into your personal brand and get them to know you a little bit better as well. So yeah, chatting about recent industry news and the things you're doing to develop your own skills as well are probably some quite good ideas for posts.
No, noted. I think like something that can actually be your personal brand as well, and maybe some sort of a niche is turning that technical content into like, something that the average person can understand as well. So like working in finance, like a lot of the content marketers that we have, they have to distill all these technical investment terms into like the most like jargon-free article ever. And that's like a really, really big skill in itself. And it really helps because when they post this thought leadership, anyone can understand like what investment grade bonds are, for example, in like a few lines. And I feel like that could be like quite an interesting niche and an attachment to your personal brand. And it can also be really really, really like helpful when you're trying to sell yourself to organizations as well, that look like, I can turn all this technical stuff into something that the average person can understand. And, that just shows that I understand it a lot more as well. So I'll definitely say like that's something that you can kind of look into and, maybe take some inspo and start trying to post like from that as well. But I think with that being said, I'm not really seeing any more questions as well. But guys, like honestly, this session has really just been helpful to kind of like, get a bit of insight into how to build our personal brands on LinkedIn. And oh, just saw another question come through. How do you work up on the credentials to become a thought leader slash influencer on LinkedIn? It's a very interesting one. Any views, Shona?
So I'd say in terms of like credentials and stuff like that, I don't think there's any kind of magical like number of followers, for example, that kind of shows you as a LinkedIn influencer. My friends have jokingly, like to take the mick out of me, referred to me as a LinkedIn influencer, but I do not see myself in that light at all. I'd say honestly, just keep going. Like you look back at anyone's first post and it'll have got 3 likes and one of them will have been their mates that they begged and pleaded them to go and like that post. It builds up over time. Obviously, viral posts can kind of like help boost that in like large amounts. We've seen people gain like 50,000 followers overnight from posts that have like absolutely popped off. But I'd say like building it over time counts as well. If you're sort of posting like content that is thought leadership, that's starting conversations, that will build over time. And I think there's a speak to with students and grads, because we're obviously like a bit younger, we don't have all of these years of experience. There's a little bit of imposter syndrome that comes with it as well. You kind of think, okay, who's going to want to hear me talking about this? Like, oh, I don't have as many followers as that person, because social media naturally lends itself to a lot of comparison, particularly on LinkedIn, where people are talking about their achievements and all the like 15,000 internships they've completed this year. It's quite a lot. So I'd say don't worry about specific numbers. Just start talking about stuff you're interested in and build it up over time. And slowly you'll kind of get to feel when people are really engaging with your stuff and you're starting to have those conversations. But yeah, LinkedIn is definitely a long game.
Nice. What about you, Sam? I know a lot of your clients as well are really trying to be thought leaders in their space, right? Are there any certain credentials that you kind of like mark up against in order to be a accredited thought leader slash influencer?
Yeah, so again, like echo Shona's point about it being a long game. Like some bits you just can't force quickly. Like having 40 years experience in an industry, that definitely helps, but you can't do that if you're 20 something. Like it's obviously not possible. So that's definitely important, to just play that long game and acknowledge that it will come with time. But something that you can do to accelerate it a little bit is use what's called the halo effect, which is basically about, it's the idea that our perceptions of something are influenced by things that we associate it with. So people's perception of you will be influenced by who they associate you with. So if you can maybe interview some people that are already thought leaders or already influential, through your association with them, people will almost start to see you on that level. So if you can kind of collaborate with industry leaders already, or collaborate with big people, or maybe interview them on a podcast, for example, that starts to build authority by your association with them. And obviously, you're not going to get Jeff Bezos to do an interview with you tomorrow. So you can start kind of smaller and build it up and up and up and go for someone that's slightly more influential each time. But that was something that I did when I was a student, because I was like, why would anyone trust me? So I just started interviewing people. And at first it was, someone that I'd just messaged and spoken to a little bit. And then it went up and up and just kind of reached out to bigger and bigger accounts. That definitely helped.
Noted, noted. I believe someone actually wanted to ask a question directly. Very confident bunch we have today. So Shay, go on and ask your question.
Yeah, guys, thanks for the seminar webinar. I learned so much already. Just a kind of final question. When I've kind of like spoken to some friends who have done quite a lot of like LinkedIn, like outbound, trying to send DMs like for sales or just personal inquiries. And one of the kind of like controversial points that we spoke about was whether you should be kind of like friendly or be super direct in like a LinkedIn outbound or like a direct message, because assuming like the person on the other side is already receiving like a few hundred or like thousands of direct messages, then should you basically just go in kind of like just directly stating what you want, like hi, I want this from you, or should you go in personalize it and try to kind of go for the small talk, if there's a high probability that the persons are going to respond? What approach do you think is better?
Interesting. So I've got, at least from my own experience, a couple of different examples of both ends of the scale of those kind of messages, and both are bad and you want to meet in the middle. So one example of scale, I've received connection requests that say, can I have a job? That's it. And the other side of the one, I've received connection requests that say, hi, how's your day going? And as one of them's as direct as you can be, one of them's as starting a conversation as you can be, but neither of them are great, because in the nicest way possible, I don't have the time in my day to respond to a bunch of people asking how my day is going. And if I say, good, thanks, how about you? They say, good. That conversation's ended right there. Whereas asking for a job right away, I don't know anything about you. I don't know who you are. So it's finding that bit in the middle where you're kind of showing your intentions with the conversation, but you're not straight up asking for something. So instead, a message could be more along the lines of, as we sort of discussed earlier, like, hi, I saw your post on this. I'm in the same industry as you. We would